All right, so welcome everybody. I was a little worried at the beginning. Row 2 was looking very empty, and then Bernie started a trend, so there's a bit in row 2, so thank you everybody for coming a bit closer. Good evening, welcome to our first event of the season. My name is Pam Laycock, and I'm a Senior Vice President and Chief of Staff at Torstar, a Canadian media company. I'm also President of the Schulich Global Alumni Network. So for many of you, you're either part of my team, or as I was saying to some of the students today, I consider you pre-alumni, so you're all still part of my team. So I'm really looking forward to meeting more of you and getting more engaged with you over time. I'm also delighted to be your Master of Ceremonies tonight. And what I'd like to do is start with a land acknowledgement, then I will introduce our speakers for tonight and just give you a bit of a flavor for how the evening will go, and we'll get started. So the Indigenous Nations Land Acknowledgement, which is officially proclaimed at the beginning of all York University events, is what I'll share with you tonight. As this event is also virtual, we're not all gathered in the same space. And so I recognize that this land acknowledgement may not be for the territory that you're currently on, if you are joining us virtually. And we ask that if that's the case, that you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are on and those current treaty holders. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which the York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat, and is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and this territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, and it's an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. And now, a brief word about this evening and the reason that we're all here. The Dean's Leadership Dialogue Series is a relatively new initiative here at Schulich, and it's created to give members of the Schulich community a real opportunity to engage with business leaders on a wide range of issues, and I think you'll see that tonight. This series offers really authentic conversations with successful leaders who happen to be Schulich alumni. And it's really designed to give you, our audience, a glimpse into these leaders' journeys, their journeys of personal growth and discovery, as well as a deep dive into some of the experiences that shape their journeys, what they're doing in their businesses today, and how they're thinking about the business, their strategy, competition, the economy, and broader things. So it should be a really interesting conversation tonight. Before I introduce our two guests, I do want to quickly mention a couple of important matters. So from a technical perspective, we're asking everyone, whether you're virtual or in person, to submit your questions via Menti. And it's a portal, it's menti.com. I don't know if they're putting it up on here. Are you putting it up on there for people to see? There we go. Menti.com, menti.com. And then you input the code 77770419. Almost sounds like pizza delivery, doesn't it? So if everyone does that, I'll keep an eye on the questions. And then after the Dean and Vito have had a great chat, we'll entertain some of the questions from the audience, both in person and virtual. Okay? Great. And so have this conversation, the Dean and Vito, and then, as I said, we'll come back up and we'll engage in a bit of a conversation as well. We've started a tiny bit late, so my aim is to have us done by 10 after 8. Okay? Great. Thank you. So now I'm going to introduce our special guest, Vito Paladino. Vito is the president of Audi Canada, the first Canadian ever appointed to that position. Prior to joining Audi, he was director of sales and operations for Mazda Canada. Last year, he was named Canadians to Watch by the Automotive News Canada. He's also a proud Schulich BBA and MBA, so a double, which is fantastic. And we're really delighted that Vito could join us here today. So welcome, Vito. And to question, curiously critique, grill, whatever you want to call it, Vito, is our dean, Detlef Zwick. And he's the... So just a quick word about the dean. Many of you probably have already talked to him through, if you're students, through the first couple of weeks, etc. Under Dean Zwick's leadership, Schulich is focused on several key initiatives, including the delivery of a world-class student learning experience, program innovation, high-impact research, and the digital transformation of the school. So welcome, Dean Zwick. And I will hand it over to the two of you to start the dialogue.
Thank you very much, Pam. Is the microphone working? I think it's working.
Hi, guys. Hey, it's good to be here.
Excellent. Back.
Yeah, back
at Schulich.
Yeah, missed you guys.
Fantastic. I should also mention, it's actually interesting, it occurred to me just a few minutes ago that this event was supposed to happen, I think in late March, maybe early April of this year. We had just returned to in-person classes a few weeks earlier. We were quite excited to have it, and then we had to cancel it because you informed us that you were working on a COVID infection.
Yeah.
And
so this time, I booked the trip to Germany afterwards.
Tonight. Yeah, well, in Germany, you probably pick it up. So we're so glad you're here now and that you made it through COVID with no problems. And very excited to be able to now have the event and with so many students and faculty also joining us. I thought I'd start a little bit this conversation with sketching out a little bit, exploring your own personal sort of leadership journey. Your rise to the top at Audi Canada was very rapid. You joined Audi 7 years later. You joined as director of sales operations. 7 years later, you're president. Obviously, you had been in the automobile industry, in the car industry for longer. You were at Mazda before, but within Audi, incredibly rapid rise. You said in an interview last year with York University's Alumni Magazine that when you were a kid growing up in Vaughan, which isn't far away from here, in fact, you had a photo in your room of a Lamborghini Countach. Is that correct? Countach. And you said that you loved the bold design. Interestingly, Lamborghini is now part of the Audi family of luxury brands. You said Lamborghini photo was, and I quote, a daily reminder to remain focused on my future ambitions. So it does seem like the ambition to make a career in the automotive industry was really baked in sort of early on. Was that actually the case? Mazda, Audi, was it sort of always the goal?
Yeah, Dean Zwick, absolutely. I just loved automotive. For me, it represented so many things. Automotive for me, it can be sport, right? We compete in motorsports as an industry. It can showcase design. But for me, it was just a daily reminder of something I was really passionate about. And there's other elements to it as well. Like on my side, it was a sentimental thing. My father was in automotive on the production side. Worked in Oakville with Ford just down the road on QEW for over 40 years. So it was also a sentimental attachment. So there was many layers why I loved automotive. I was a kid playing with the small toy cars very often, wanted to get into the driving, the seat of a real car very quickly. But yeah, it was just a passion point. And I think that picture of that Countach started representing more than just a car for me after a time. It was something that reminded me of staying, committed to what I wanted to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we should also mention, when you were an MBA student in the program, you were actually a part-time student while working at Mazda at that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Different experience. I was just talking to some students outside. My undergrad was obviously here permanently, working full-time student. My master's was definitely different, work and mixture with school. But the benefit of the master's program for me was it just gave me a fresh perspective. You can be in an environment for a long period of time. I was working for over 10, 11 years at that time. And it's easy to get stuck into a particular way of thinking. It's just, groupthink can happen when you're in that similar environment. So it was really a great experience to come in here and have different perspectives and learn from different students that were all also established in their career or different industries. And so definitely experience between my undergrad and master's. Enjoyed both for different reasons.
One of the things that struck me reading your sort of bio was that, again, coming back to 7 years at Audi, from director of sales operations to president, it's a short period of time. Did you ever feel this is fast for me, that I'm maybe I'm not ready for the next step, because obviously there were steps in between, that this felt to you like a short period of time? Or how did you experience that?
Yeah, I don't want to seem, the answer might seem overconfident. It didn't feel too short, but at the same time, it wasn't something, while you aspire to lead a company that you really are passionate about, maybe at the beginning of your career, you probably do look at it, trying to climb and do different roles and play, we call it playing the piano, and you really are fixated on it. But over time, you start to just really enjoy the experience or the discipline. And so while sure, it was something that I wanted to do and, hope I would be given the opportunity to do it, when it happened, it didn't feel too short, but it wasn't something I was just waiting for. It was the perfect time for me. And I felt really ready because I knew the organization. I knew, obviously I've been doing the industry almost for 25 years, but knew the brand, and knew the team. And that's important because there's a connection to you as a leader when the team sees that leadership can come from within of the organization. So no, it didn't feel too soon, but at the same time, it wasn't something that I was counting the days, is this going to happen or not happen?
And from your perspective, as at the top of Audi Canada now, do you think you have to always feel completely ready to take on the next step, to then ultimately end up as the president? But even the steps in between, how important was that for you? Or was there also an element of, I'm growing here, this is going to be part of a moment of growth, I'm excited about it, I'm stepping into it, and I'll figure it out? Just trying to unpack a little bit the experience, as many of these students will be sort of in that, I think, trajectory soon as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can see why it would be related. I never said no to an opportunity. It was really important to pull yourself out of your comfort zone. There were some roles that really felt, this is what I've been preparing myself for, and it felt like a natural extension. There are roles that it felt like, really? Like, you guys really want to put me in this environment here? I'm not sure if this is where my skill set is. And yet, I learned so much more about myself as a leader and learned so much more about the organization, good, bad, or ugly, of where we need to be better. But what ended up happening, because I've had, a fortunate opportunity to do so many different roles in our industry, now you're so much, I can relate, I can understand, I can connect with our team. And I just feel like that, for me, you can't micromanage your career to the extent where everything's going to be perfect. And so when opportunities come along, if they make you feel uncomfortable, those might actually be the right opportunities than the ones that feel super, within your kind of goalposts. So that's the way I handled it. It worked out, and I really enjoyed the roles in the end that were quite different than what I thought I was preparing myself for, because of that comfort zone. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, in this context as well, I think a significant moment I picked up reading sort of your, biography really is the transition from a fantastic global company, Mazda. You had been there for significant amount of time, meaning established a reputation, built sort of a cultural competency within that company, and clearly you could easily see this is a place where I can keep growing and succeeding. But you made the choice then, 12, 13, I think, to say, right, I'm actually going to move to a different company, even though it was the same position, director of sales, marketing. You moved in that sense lateral. Why leave a great company? Yes, you joined obviously a great company, but that moment,
Yeah.
what went on in your mind?
You know, I normally take periods in my career to kind of assess where I am and where I want to be and where I want to go. It was less about rejecting where I was and more about, you know, being enticed to do something that was still in an industry that I loved, but it was premium, you know, premium side of the business. It was a different brand. It was different regionalization, right? Japanese and European companies are very different. It felt right if I was going to make the change. I think there is a period of time that you don't want to take too long if you're going to make that pivot change. But for me, it was just right to kind of start a new chapter. And it was more about what I was looking forward to, and not about what I was leaving, even though the company I was leaving was great. They were very good to me and a great brand.
Mm-hmm. Great. You know, when it comes to leadership, tourism is that successful leaders are driven by certain values, purpose, a philosophy perhaps. I know you have sort of a personal philosophy. You're in an interview with Bay Street Bull magazine. You said, you know, what was the best advice or the greatest influence for you? It was your father, who worked for Ford Motor Company. His advice: be passionate about whatever you do, push yourself to be the best. Strikes me as very much, very strong, simple, strong, personal philosophy. So tell us a little bit how that has sort of played out in your career, in your choice making for perhaps roles you sought out. But also, is there, on top of that sort of personal philosophy, do you have a larger, perhaps, leadership philosophy and approach that drives you sort of in your current role?
Yeah. You know, what I appreciated about the advice from my parents was that, it's easy maybe to be so invested in making sure that your children are, going to be in a good place, that you could be tempted to influence, a particular area or business or profession. And they didn't do that. They really, it was really a simple message of first do something you're really passionate about. And I really believe in that. I just don't think you can bring your best version of yourself if you're not doing something you're passionate about. If you're not doing that in someone you're competing with, or even just, you're just always going to be a step behind. Be the best part. I know this is kind of a world of like more participant, get the participant badge and not openly say you're going to play to win, but it's exactly the mentality. The mentality is to be passionate and push yourself to reach your fullest potential. And perhaps over time, and this is what maybe goes into the personal maybe mantra of leading teams, and then true leadership is then shifting that not only to your individual success, but then what's absolutely amazing and rewarding is pushing the people around you to reach their full potential and winning as a team and succeeding. And so the mantra is simple. We actually, in a lot of my social media often I do, just hashtag team one. Like I really just believe one team, we win as a team. And it's, the one thing I'll say is you might not remember looking back the individual records or numbers of what was successful, but you will remember the journey and how the team felt and how you celebrated your wins or you overcame your challenges. And so that team one perspective, I think from leaders, if you're not doing that, if you're not thinking that way, if you're just thinking just for yourself, I think it will only bring you to a certain perspective. So that's how a really good perspective of how, great advice, but I've kind of unpacked it to how I lead today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. And it has a very strong anchor for me in performance, in competing and the joy in some ways, the joy of competing and doing it as a team as well, right? Which I think is great, really, and obviously relevant in the industry which is one of the most competitive industries in the world, really. Interesting aspect, I think, of it was already mentioned by Pam, is that you're the first Canadian in the role as the president of Audi Canada. It's a global organization, so it's not perhaps too surprising that even the president of Audi Canada could be a non-Canadian, and that was in fact the case before. So I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on the fact that you are Canadian and what role that might have played for Audi to say it's time to actually have a Canadian as a president.
Yeah.
If there is something specific sort of about these values perhaps that you bring to it.
Yeah, I think Canadians have tons to offer, or even those that end up coming here and living in the country and getting exposed to it, considering how diverse and multicultural. So to kind of really perform well in this environment, you have to collaborate. You have to be able to work with others. You have to be able to manage different perspectives, which might not be the case depending on different regions of the world. This is why I think, and it's also important for a company to say that you are going to promote from within, and you do see leaders. There's some really amazing talent in Canada that deserve the opportunity. So that's why I think it's important. With respect to the importance, me being a Canadian president or different nationality as far as just the day-to-day business, performance is performance. So it's great to be Canadian. Obviously, I take great pride at leading Audi Canada, but in the end, we all have to do the same job, whether we're leading Canada or the US or Germany, and that is to make sure that we're doing the best for our brand.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. As part of a global conglomerate, 100 markets, I think, right now you can find Audis or any one of the brands of the group. Canada is an important market, not a small market, but a smaller market perhaps. How do you make sure within this global company your voice is heard as part of the leadership team? And you told me you're about to go to Germany to be part of the global strategy meeting. So what is it you bring to the table all there, and how do you make sure it's heard?
I think there would be a long answer, but truthfully, there's really, really a short answer to it, and that's just performance. I wish I could, I could definitely elaborate on it, but ultimately to be recognized, and we do have a seat at the table. We've come a long way. We're now a top 8 brand globally for Audi. We're a leader in many areas in Canada. And so just like in life, if you want to be significant or you want your voice to be heard, performing, you have plenty of ears to hear about your different perspectives. And we've been quite lucky. They've really embraced the Canadian organization, our perspective, because we have a lot to be proud of what we've achieved here. And we have a lot to contribute to the global community of Audi, and that's what's happening.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about an interesting comment you made recently in the report on Business Magazine. You stated that the automotive industry was in a pivot period. Well, you're the president. That's the person people look to when it comes to transformation, to change management, to be a leader of change. Audi itself is undertaking very ambitious transitions, has a strategic outlook to become, for example, electrified significantly, perhaps more than any other traditional, especially luxury brand. So you are part of a company that is itself very change-oriented, aggressively. Now, electrification means also big change along all elements of the organization: R&D, supply chain, manufacturing, marketing, sales, all of it. The distributor network, I think we can maybe talk about the dealer network as well a little bit. So where do you see the biggest obstacles in this transition to electrification, especially in Canada, and how do you plan to overcome them?
Yeah, I think it's changing behavior, change management. So first, the industry, everything is absolutely changing. It's completely a pivot period, whether it's how we go to market with respect to the retail experience, customer experience, whether it's our product becoming fully electrified, we're all in on electrification of our product. Digitalization, software, like you said, everything. Industrialization. We're in a period right now in automotive that really is recalibrating how to industrialize itself with battery cell and precious metals. So all this change really then the key is, number one, not to have complacency, to make sure that you see the opportunity, to also ensure that you're inspiring and everyone's coming along for the ride. It's not one leader pulling an organization or a few leaders pulling the organization through the change. You really need to do a good job of all your different stakeholders, investors, employees, dealers, partners, and ensure everyone understands why you have to make the change and bring them along for the change. When you don't do that, then you start to have friction, you start to have, second guessing if this is the right move and what you do when you do that though is you have a whole organization that comes behind you because the one thing you don't want with change is you don't want to hang on that transition curve way too long. It becomes a really, really painful process. You need to make the transition as soon as possible. So really making sure that the whole organization is calibrated properly on the bus, and it's about really then moving in the same direction. That what I would say is probably the biggest challenge, outside of all the technical stuff which is going to happen.
I mean, in this process, how do you see yourself? I mean, as you lead a transition like this, a team through a transition like this, where really it's a lot about, it seems to me, getting everyone on your team and organization to really believe in this direction, and this is where it has to go. And you made once the point to me in a conversation that this is sort of a life and death situation. This is not something we can do on the side. Electrification is where it's going to be, and we're going full in. So there will be doubters. There will be those that tag along maybe with a bit laggard mindset. How do you see yourself as the manager of this change? Is this enjoyable? Is this part of the job you see as central for you as a leader?
Yeah, it is the best part of the job. It's where you have, like as a leader, your job isn't to manage the business. Your job is really to ensure you're performing to its optimal level today, but it's really about ensuring that you're ready for tomorrow. And that's really the strategic element part of it. So that part is definitely the most interesting. But it's easy then sometimes to not dedicate the whole organizational power to change at times because you're so comfortable, the more successful you are, the more you might not even see that there is a need for change. Electrification is a good example. We still sell tons of ICE vehicles. But there was a point in our industry where it really was becoming, electrification's a model or it's a preference, versus about a bigger conversation about sustainability and how do you as an organization recalibrate what your key purpose is. So for me as a leader, obviously getting by inclusion in the strategy development is important because if it's just handed down, again, I don't think you get that same buy-in. But you're also as a leader ensuring that you are challenging a similar perspective, that you're not just complacency is probably the biggest counter measure to change and accepting how rapidly you really do need to. But I think as a leader, you also have to manage both, perform well today and absolutely ensure the organization is all in on modernizing and ensuring it's as equally successful or even more successful in the future.
And maybe we can come back to the complacency part and how that can be a hindrance to change, right? And or seeing the opportunity perhaps later than would have been possible if you have time for that. I mean, one of the things that have struck me learning about you and talking to you is the importance of teams. And you've already brought up your team and the strength of the team and the importance of it here tonight a lot. How do you build teams? How do you specifically build a team? What do you look for to build a top team?
You look for different perspectives, diversity. You look for those that are willing to speak up and communicate, are engaged. You're looking for those for me. It's important to be competitive and passionate. These are the type of characteristics. but then you have to embody them and really exercise them all the time. You know, it's one thing to say you are into diversity of different perspectives and then not build a forum in your organization to really have good conversation, learn, exchange, listen. You know, like what happens in this institution, we're all here at Schulich, if you really believe this process, then why would it ever change then when you start leaving this building and start your career and start leading companies? What works so well here is you're able to pull different insights and conversations and discussions. For me, that is what our organization is, and that's when we're at our best self. When you start to kind of hone in on similar thinking, not challenge that perspective, then I think you end up leaving opportunities for disruptors or different types of, challenges that come your way. So my role is absolutely always to ensure that we're exercising that part of our muscle memory.
And the whole aspect of disruption and inviting challenges is certainly something I'd like to get to as well in a minute, because I think a lot of folks will be actually interested in having a bit of a conversation around your strategic thinking and how to win in the market. And I want to leave time for questions, because there might also be questions from students from around the world. And what they're seeing, which might be sort of a little bit different than the specific Canadian market. I do want to set up the next segment around competitive strategy a little bit, because the North American market has been an excellent market for Audi over the past definitely 2 decades, particularly in Canada. Over the past 10 years. 10 years ago, Audi was selling about half the amount of cars as Mercedes and BMW. Today, you're outselling them, or about the same, just maybe a little bit outselling, but there's no more lagging in retail. You're leading. Audi has developed a global reputation as a tech car, a tech leader, sort of a high-tech innovator. It is the brand, the luxury brand, the German luxury brand that isn't perceived as stodgy, perhaps. It's young, energetic. And it's been a great ride in many ways, right? But there, of course, recently have been also some challenges. So again, a period of immense success, right? New challenges come on the horizon. And I want to get there because I think that's a bigger conversation about competitive strategy. The immediate question that I have as a president of Audi right now, that I wonder how you confront it, has to be around the supply chain. Okay, it's certainly one. Cars require about 30,000 parts from around the world. It's a famously global supply chain based on sort of this notion of efficiency, and here we are. Okay, we have had 2.5 years, and no end in sight, it seems, of supply chain disruption. What does that mean to you? How have the last 3 years changed your thinking around, say, supply chains and the importance of that, and how it affects your business here on the ground?
Yeah, supply chain. There's a lot there. With supply chain, as far as on the technical side, the organizations had to vertically integrate, in some key areas to make sure we're not as vulnerable. Future supply chain with electrification, local industrialization is changing. There's no doubt, in a very traditional business, instead of just centralizing and looking for economies of scale, there is a need to make sure that you're more diverse and risk management. But then on the, going to market portion of it, while this is happening, it doesn't pivot very quickly, right? So the supply chain challenges you have in the short term, medium term are things that get better, but at the same time won't get, you can't fundamentally solve them overnight. And so then you change your business. Like for us, it's always been about, of course, demand generation and bringing the brand to market, and that continues to be it. But now nurturing the customer experience, because you have to wait on some models a significant amount of time, over a year or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months, depending on what you're interested in. That is a long time now to nurture a relationship with a customer and So your purpose changes a little bit, and your relationship changes, and how you communicate. And there were lessons to learn for us of how often the right amount of communication is, and how much you need to nurture the relationship if a consumer is, or an Audi client is waiting for a car for over a year. But if you don't pivot, you don't change to that and just wait for the supply chain to fix itself, you're going to have a pretty upset customer base. So it really meant the entire marketing mix, the entire portfolio of the business to adapt and change and support the current environment. And it's worked for us because you have a great opportunity now to create some excitement in the journey before you're receiving the car. It's maybe not instant gratification, but some of the greatest products that don't deliver instant gratification, as long as it's nurtured properly, it becomes a great experience once that Audi finally arrives and you take delivery. So pivot on the business side, definitely pivot on the supply chain side. There, no doubt, everything I just said about pivoting on the customer side, it doesn't mean that we are not working feverishly to ensure we can make the supply chain part of the business better. But it comes with the whole organization kind of adapting.
So because of the supply, what you're saying, I think, is because of the supply chain issues and therefore delays in delivering the cars to customers, you actually had to rethink what it means, for example, to have customer relationships and how to maintain them and sort
how
of
to
marketing.
Communicate, how often.
Yes.
And still, there's still a lot of things that we've learned through this experience that we're still planning on deploying. Where when the supply chain is very efficient and very effective, and you're turning around a product or a delivery in a shorter period of time, then there isn't that as much of that nurturing and relationship building in that stage of the relationship. Of course, it happens during ownership. So the ownership cycle and the pre-ownership cycle is very different, at least on the pre-side.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Do you think that one takeaway from the pandemic and the supply chain disruptions we saw during the pandemic, but also now, and probably lasting for a while longer, long-term lead to rethinking of the supply chain and how to build them in your industry? Yeah,
for sure. I think, like I said, vertical integration of key components, software, technology that you don't necessarily want to have too much exposure to risk of having only one vulnerable source. That is one. I think the whole customer experience though, is being rethought. Automotive had a very traditional experience, and it's changing. It has to change. You don't buy all of your other goods and services and things you're passionate about one way, and then go back to a traditional automotive experience just because it's automotive. So it really accelerated supply chain and digitalization and electrification, all these pivot changes on how we expect the customer experience to be. And in a simple way, it's just becoming way more customer centric. Everything we're doing is to make sure it's a most customer centric execution versus not necessarily, okay, well, this has a benefit on the back end, which it could, but you need to make sure that you're thinking of the end result. So if you're centralized and you have a lot of vulnerability and you're going to produce everything in the same spot, then you're definitely going to have moments of risk. But at the same time, even if the supply chain was working the way it was working, it taught us that there's probably a lot of things we need to do differently. And that is customization, personalization, and how we bring our products or services or experiences. So whether it was the pandemic, the supply chain issue, there's been a lot of change, but I think for us, because we have this perspective, like our whole mantra is to live progress here at Audi. Like that's not just saying that we're going to be Vorsprung or a technology company in automotive. It is to make sure culturally we're always kind of rethinking things. So as these problems come around, it's not about just solving the problem. It's also about, okay, how do we need to rethink this to be a better company? And it's been a great experience, but it's been a lot. It's been, it makes it fun because what we were doing 25 years ago is very, very different now. Whether from retail, whether from brand, whether from purchasing, whether it's the production of the vehicles, everything has changed.
That's great. And I think innovation is a large ingredient in what makes it fun to, I think, work with the team, work for an innovation-oriented company, but also to lead it would be my expectation. Very good.
Company standing still is not fun.
It's
to be
not
part
fun,
of,
right?
No.
So, but it's interesting to see, where you need to innovate. It is not just on the supply chain. It's not just on, let's say, the manufacturing because you're electrifying. There are all these spillover effects, as you explained, into marketing now and customer relationship building that you need to rethink as well, which is fascinating. Of course, one aspect of the electrification, it's not that it's not already happening at Audi, but will intensify, I think, as you push that strategy further, is, of course, digital transformation, bringing more software, more technology even into the car. Audi has long been a leader of in-car technology. So I think there's an expectation that Audi will continue to be that. Of course, there's a challenger out there right now that is sort of challenging your position on this, but we go there in a minute. Okay. That's Tesla, in case you haven't picked that up.
Who? No.
But Audi clearly investing massively in R&D, in software development, digital technology in the car, and so on. I mean, when you listen to, sometimes you talk and read about Audi, the question is, at what point is it still a car company, and when is it a technology company? Is that a conversation that's happening in Audi at all?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, certainly. A premium mobility company, needs to do both now. What we're very good, previous automotive was very engineering oriented, and there's still engineering aspects to it. Obviously, you need a strong brand and what you represent, but technology, that is another USP you have to deliver, and it's actually the most biggest opportunity, because software and technology will allow you to personalize the vehicle to extreme levels. Like we talked about it earlier, whether it's autonomous driving or personalizing your car of what you have today, you can have different features tomorrow, extra horsepower, different types of functionality. So it is an absolute requirement, I would say simply we have to be both, and we plan to be both, and we are both.
And then let's talk about Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, a lot of the success we already discussed of Audi was to be the insurgent brand in a way. Worked really well. You became the establishment brand, and suddenly you have Tesla on the horizon, just as, in a way, perhaps accelerating Audi's thinking around electrification as well. Mm-hmm. I think it was quite clear Audi was moving towards the direction, but then you have Tesla come in, building cars, but also building a brand. How do you compete with that challenger?
Yeah, going all in, and that's what we've done. The industry had, it was an ICE business. And the majority of it was, and even when electrification started popping into the industry, there was never a good business case. Consumers weren't really, gravitating to it. And now we've got some disruptors, obviously you've mentioned one, that come in and have completely defined their brand to be electrified mobility. And we see the opportunity, and also we just see, I think because we're this living progress type of brand, it was a pivot period for us to take a step back and say, what do we want to be? What does the future look like? Where is automotive in connection to sustainability, electrification, digitalization, the experience, omni-channel world? And we went all, very directly, we're all in now. And so how do we compete? We compete doing what we did extremely well in, perhaps we'll call it the traditional part of the industry, transforming ourselves, and it's already happening. In segments we compete with electrification, we are leaders in many segments. There's countries that are the top electrified brand across the globe. We just can't get enough right now, so it's amazing the demand, it's incredible. So we feel really confident we can compete with the traditional manufacturers, competitors, and also some of the new disruptors. And it's because you have to be both. For our side, it's not just about tech. Tech is a really important part of it. Software is an important part of it. But a premium brand also your fit and finish, your materials, your refinement. The way the car drives is still extremely important. And technology also, you need to kind of deliver that in the experience part of it too, when you're interacting with the brand, whether digitally or in a more physical environment. So it's been amazing. It's been an amazing pivot, but we feel really confident that already we're seeing great successes. And we've carved our own path. And like I said, you have to be all in. You can't have a half-baked strategy and say you're going to be a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Consumers then don't know really what you are trying to be. And so we've been pretty direct. And the advantage we have is we have a really loyal fan base. I've met some of them, at the reception part. So there's this love for this brand already. It's emerged. As you've mentioned, now we're leaders in the Canadian part of the business. So it's not just about conquesting and converting. It's also about, being the source for our customers that want to take the transition over and being the brand that they want to do that with and continuing the conversation and nurturing that relationship. So yeah, we feel pretty good that we're going to be the ones leading the way.
And it's worth reminding folks that, maybe in Canada, around here, Toronto, or North America, and generally, Tesla is the dominant brand of electric cars, but that's not actually reality in other parts of the world, which sometimes might get lost when you just look at what's happening in North America and that there's a different game is happening there. I want to challenge you as well a little bit tonight, because one of the things, and I mentioned this to you, and it seemed to me that I knew something about Audi that you didn't know, which was the fact that Audi was actually the first European manufacturer of a hybrid car.
You told me
that came out in 1997 and never went anywhere. That's probably why you had never heard of it. But again, it's clear Audi, at the forefront, exploring new technologies and being there as a response, to what Toyota was doing, and so on. So clearly Audi was going there a long time ago, 25 years ago, they were exploring this. And then also this long-standing reputation as an innovator, really, with inside the car, but also engine, design, all of it. It is somewhat surprising, I think, in retrospect, when you look back, why it wasn't Audi that was the first, perhaps, well, one of the first, I would say, probably the first. You would expect to be first, especially among luxury brands, to come out with a brand or with a model that is fully electrified, not Tesla. Right? It's kind of interesting when you start. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess when you're trying to be a progressive company, you're going to obviously try to stretch yourself, look for new opportunities, new products, new innovations. Some are successful, some maybe it's too soon, some are not successful at all. With electrification in particular, outside of even just that example, the market is just now, for many reasons, really shown its potential. But the time period you're referring to, it's more so that even though you want to be innovative and you want to bring many different ideas and perspectives or try to switch the paradigm or disrupt, eventually to sustain it, you need a business case. The market has to accept it. It needs to start to self-generate and create a business. And perhaps it was just too soon. And too soon in relative, like 4 or 5 years ago, the industry was saying it was too soon for electrification. And now we're talking about, in a few years, 60% of the vehicles will be, electrified. And in Canada, the policy is by 2035, 100% of the new vehicles have to be electrified. So things have really pivoted quickly in an industry that traditionally is kind of evolved, improved, but not to the same pivot. But yeah, the business case must have been different. I wouldn't know, I'm not familiar with it, but it certainly is different now. Consumers really see the benefit, but we see it as well because I think it ties into so many aspects of our identity. And that is why you're going to see our complete portfolio become electrified and have every segment will have an electrified model because it does check the box of supporting what we see is important for digitalization. It does check the box of what we see as premium mobility for us is sustainability. It really has to be a component of it, or it doesn't make sense if you can't sustain for your future in many ways. And it's what it's what the future looks like, to have all of these requirements kind of pulling together. So it's the right time. It's a huge amount of R&D and investment. We still plan on having the best of both worlds during the transition with ICE cars and electrified vehicles, but the opportunity is significant. Now, the industry is going to have to reindustrialize itself, because to create batteries and battery cells and, you know, precious metals, and having recycling and that whole cycle, you're really reinventing the industrialization of the automotive industry. So it will have a transition period, but it's exciting. And perhaps we weren't if we were the first and didn't become the one that that came out the strongest, I think we're going to be the ones that are going to be leading the pack.
And we'll be winning at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also, in addition to all the things you mentioned, I think there's a story about being successful. Being really successful in your model makes it also harder to see, perhaps, or
for sure.
take sort of the plunge away from what is really working well.
That's a good individual thing too, though. Like if you're doing extremely well, and it is tough at times. You mentioned complacency and coming back to it. It is tough to perhaps challenge yourself to think different, whether it's business or personal, when things are going well. And yet that's exactly the time you need to be pushing yourself and putting yourself out of your comfort zone. That's exactly the time when you need to kind of reassess and say, okay, what are the next steps for me to take my own career or business or whatever it is, team, to the next level. So it is certainly probably one of the most important things that I think successful organizations or individuals do more often.
No, that's a really good point, and it's clear that it's happening. It's certainly happening now, and maybe later than Tesla to some degree, although not that much, I think, as sometimes is portrayed, but still as a leader actually in the industry now. So it's happening, but it's interesting to overcome success. I think it's always
Absolutely.
a challenge for a successful company to.
Just to make sure we have a bit of time for
Yep.
questions. It's just about 8 o'clock now.
All right, so let's last question for me, and then we go to the audience questions. Fantastic, because I do want to hear from Vito. In 20, 30 years from now, what will it look like? How will we drive cars? What will mobility look like in your mind? Will we be driving electric cars? Will it be something different already?
Yeah, I think electric will still be part of the future for sure. There probably, sustainable fuels are still something that most brands, and including ourselves, are looking at. I guess the creative example would be, if we were leaving this function, you would summon your car. It would make its way over to you individually. By the way, the parking spaces would probably be way closer together, because to make your parking garage more here at Schulich much more efficient, you would probably prefer only autonomous only, so you get the cars super close. If you had a long trip today, perhaps you would be in a hotel. Well, I think premium mobility will change to living rooms, to sport. Your car could really transform itself to whatever you need it to be. And then perhaps you want to enjoy your vehicle in sport, bring it on the track, and order 100 horsepower through the vehicle for that weekend. It's really incredible. And a lot of these things aren't that far-fetched. That's the amazing. Autonomous driving and customizing your vehicles, and all of the digitalization around it and the connectivity to it. It's really what makes this change a lot of fun. And hopefully a lot of the minds here at Schulich, look at automotive and look at Audi as something that they want to kind of extend into their career and keep the innovation going.
Excellent. That sounds quite exciting. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
And let's go to Pam and some of the audience questions. Great.
Whoops, can folks hear me?
Now the hard questions.
There you go. There are a few that have some common themes, so I thought I'd put a couple together. There's a couple that are interesting about the nuances and the differences of working in a Japanese business culture and a German business culture versus even a North American business culture, which is maybe, where you grew up and got your education.
That's a great question. And I experienced a domestic one, because at the time, Ford had controlling interest of Mazda. They are different. Different for, Japanese culture, very process oriented. And I would say controversial or strategic decisions, a lot happens before the main boardroom, which was always interesting. But really an acceptance of different perspectives. I would say with Audi, there's a lot of comfort level of having good debate and discussion, prior or after. And that's a lot of fun too, because, you're able to kind of not get so, you're able to really speak your perspective as the conversation evolves. But both have, every culture, every organization has its strengths. And I really enjoyed all of the ones I was exposed to. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Next question is sort of a theme around career path.
Okay.
And so the idea around when do you know, how do you know when it's time to move on to the next opportunity, the next organization? And you said near the beginning, right, never say no to an opportunity. So what is it that sort of goes on in your mind to know you're ready?
Yeah, in that context, never say no to opportunity within your own organization, not that you're changing from company to company to company, because I think that's, obviously there's a time to change. When do you know? I think it's your own personal personal growth curve. For some, it might be much earlier in their career. For others, I think as long as you feel like you're continuing to grow and develop, then you may end up staying much longer, which is what I did, 15 years with the company. I remember coming here to Schulich, and there's no way you are going to work for a company for that long. And I did. I had a lot of opportunities. And now here I am on almost going into my 10th year at Audi, and feel the same way about it. I think it just depends on your own personal journey, but you always want to make sure you're feeling rewarded and feeling passionate of what you do. In fact, I would say one of the things that was told to me with the culture I left, that I always felt a bit of a pride point, I was told, hey, we never had a sense that you were unhappy or dissatisfied, or you ever gave the impression of any type of negativity. And that's why I know it was the right time. Because for me, I left my last day as passionate as my first day. I'm being very, very honest. And I continue to run every day as passionate as my first day at Audi. I think that's extremely important. The minute you start kind of questioning it, I think it may even be too long. But again, it's everyone's own personal perspective.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Last couple of questions actually pertain to the industry and working in the industry. So there were a few around breaking into the automotive industry if you don't have automotive experience. So one question was around, got a lot of digital experience. Another question was around, I have no technical experience. So what is it that makes somebody sort of opportune to get into the automotive industry?
Yeah, I don't think you need automotive experience. Like, here's someone that loved automotive, had the Countach on the wall, right? So, but I'll just say what we look for, like even today in our culture, we're just looking for, really collaborative, business-oriented, problem solver, strategic. Like, I think there's these basic acumens you want, passionate engagement, as far as whether it's automotive or you have more of a digital or marketing acumen, or finance. All of that can work in automotive. Now, if you don't have a passion for what you do or the industry, then that'll be extremely, extremely difficult. But as far as coming into a corporate environment or at Audi with a long history of automotive experience, I don't think it's necessary.
And if I can just, I want to make sure, I think Vito, who has been working with our career center, the career design center, to really bring opportunities to Schulich, working with Michael Haynes in the career center as well. Thank you over there, fantastic. So those are also the kind of things certainly we really like to drive at Schulich, where one of our star alumni is also a champion for Schulich students.
And I was telling Michael, and we were talking about it, we had our head of digital and head of marketing engage with the students prior to putting the posting out and now going through recruiting. the heads of our team were like, there's some amazing questions here, and really thought-provoking questions from a different perspective. So again, just a great example of, we could have kind of put the posting out and, went through the finalists, but really having a conversation with anyone that was even considering Audi. We had so much better of a conversation of exchanging ideas and discussion, whether they were all interested in the end or not. Our team found it pretty rewarding.
Excellent.
So final question, sort of a funnish one connected to Audi and the business. Full disclosure, I'm a Raptors girl. I do not follow Formula One, so I'm asking this out of... So is Audi apparently getting into Formula One? And one of the questions was, and how does it relate to the electric car side of things?
It's a great question. So we just made the announcement that we were going to be competing in 2026, and we still have to have a chassis announcement, but we're going to be there. There were some rule changes with Formula One that really made it something that we could see our brand associated to, whether it's sustainable fuels and really electrifying the race cars, as well as being CO2 neutral in the upcoming years. So that's the reason why we felt like now there is a close connection. And then Formula One, it's the top half of the sphere of motorsports. So it's the combination of competing at a pretty significant competitive environment, and also now seeing that there is connectivity to the brand. So that's why we're going to do it, and it'll be a nice road. It'll be a great story for those that follow it, of getting ready for Formula One and everything that takes to get there, and then getting there and then competing. So there's going to be some great storytelling from us on that journey.
I was just going to say, I hope you actually, embrace all the aspects of storytelling to do
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
get into Netflix and all that. Very cool, very cool. Well, listen, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Vito and Dean Zwick, for some great questions and some really insightful and wise answers. I think we've all learned a lot today. And I really, really think it's important that we spend this time and just learn from the wisdom of those who are doing it right now, right? Like, we're here at the school. Many of us are students tonight who are really trying to, absorb as much as possible. But those of us who are out in the world, we keep learning, right? And so this is a great opportunity for us to keep learning as well. So thank you very much for coming and doing that. And thank you, everyone, for your participation. I couldn't get to all the questions. I tried to combine as many of them as I could, which was great. You can ask the color of the car questions later yourself. I didn't bring those ones up. And again, it's been a wonderful night tonight. I've really enjoyed learning everything we can. Please, everybody, mark your calendars for the next one. The next, installment in the series of the Dean's Leadership Dialogues is Katie Taylor, who is the chair of RBC. And that's on Wednesday, October the 12th, here at the school at 7 p.m. And it will also be live streamed. So hopefully you can join the program then as well. So thank you again to both of you, and thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.